you want me to ask you the question?
Okay, we can do it. Can you state your first and last name? Well, that might be interesting because I'm at 81 now, so I've stated my age, but my last name is Hammond and the first is William. So in my day, my father had a debate with his father, and it was a cranky thing about what to do with that middle name. Being Scotch, and he wanted to use my grandfather's Scotch name. I'm glad he didn't. I wouldn't have liked it. So we'll just say it. I got no middle name. Is it all right if I record this interview for academic purposes? Yes. I emailed you constant forms about the distribution interview. If you could take a look at the letter and email me back when you answer, that would be awesome. So what do you want to do with number 3?
Oh, that one, number three, I still have to email that to you. So we'll
Okay.
get to that at the end.
When and where were you born? Oh, let's have fun with that. The gods and the gift of angels said, I want you to be born in a place that's going to just be interesting. Yeah. Oakland, California was a wonderful place of oak trees. It was always the place where new and wonderful things were invented. Did they ever follow through with that? I mean, like they had the world's first revolving stage. Jim Cagney, that good old Cagney character, was billed there on the marquee playing a butler role. So was Oakland, California. They were the ones who invented the first handicap programs. They invented the first libraries in America. They gave you also the first parks and recreation. This is this little town of Oakland.
Yeah.
And they had the first professional, ongoing stage performers. But what happened is the railroad came along, these big typhoons, these corporate buggers, and they said, wait a minute, we want that in San Francisco. They rerouted that over to San Francisco, and so Oakland again, which was the starter of all these things, the focus point shifted over to San Francisco. Who was your mother and father, and where did they do for a living? Ah, this is going to be fun. You have to remember, I live in a time when women didn't go in bars, and when the men who came back from World War One were badly damaged.
Mm-hmm.
They had mustard gas, jelly gas. My father was a stretcher carrier. So his job is to go out there and find any handout. See, they were very sane in those days when they wanted you to do this. Each side would put up a white flag and they wouldn't shoot at you. He had to go out with a stretcher carrier and bring back a man who was, one hand that was waving. There were so many dead bodies that he just picked one. He come running back. So by the time he comes back from the war, he is very badly affected by this jelly gas. And the question is, what did he do for a living? Imagine now that this jelly gas and mustard gas has crossed his eyes. What kind of work can he get? Luckily, the government sent him over to the army base and he got a job as a security guard.
Yeah.
And so by this time, you've got a woman wandering around there. Bernina Haller comes wandering into a bar, and she's already been divorced from her husband because she had 2 deaths. She had actually 5 children, and by the time she arrives there, she has literally lost all of them through separation from the first husband and 2 by car accidents.
Oh.
She meets my father. This is incredible because he's shy and kind of doesn't talk too much. He's a Scottish man with the name of Hammond. His parents came over from Scotland. So they get married. And these are some of my earliest memories because they lived in Oakland. There's the Swans Market where they used to go shopping. So my father survives for a while, poor bugger with these crossed eyes. And what do you think happens next?
I don't know.
We go into the Depression. And we have all the banks closed. So him and along with other men and women, there's never recorded the history of the women on the trains, but that's a real fascinating because they had separate, actually rode in different parts of the train on top. They were allocated at the back of the train. And the girls had their own, you have to talk about the practical things of life, the going to the bathroom and the cigarettes. And the most important thing for both of them was their shoes. Because once you got off the train, you had to walk miles to look for a job. My dad would clean out 2 miles of chicken feathers and poo-poo just to make, the guy would give him $1. $1. So some of my earliest memories are having some very bad physical experiences like my dad knew that the cheapest rent in any of these Oakland old three-story buildings, that top story, that little Kugalo at the top was the cheapest rent. You had to provide your own electricity and your own light, and you got most of the heat. So he was still working at the Navy base. The Depression had come along. In the meantime, I had some very bad fall. I fell out of a two-story building by this time. There's not much medical benefits or practice of hospitals and things to go to. There's no jobs for women. Forget this, that, blah, blah, blah. That's no. And I pretty bad crushed my head and skull. And the memory is that some Irish woman came over, stuck her hand in my mouth and straightened my jaw out to give me. But I had, so what did they do? The women, this is a time when people grew a lot of vegetables and things in front. The banks are closed. People are hiding their money. And before long, men have to get on trains and go 13 million, have to go out looking for work. So whatever money the women had, they hid in their neckerchiefs, slept with that. And we sat on the train, the men slept with their shoes or triple knots around their necks.
Yeah.
So what age I'm separated from my mom and family begins to go like, while the men are gone, you've got some few men are left behind who are, not, they're on the dark side of all trips, the scan of life with its wide range of good, bad, and ugly. So he had some ugly men who would try to break the door in to get the money from the women, at the same time, not too kind. So my mother got the idea the best thing to do was to strip down the middle of Mission Boulevard, which was a sort of central strip. And, okay, remember Depression? So what you've got is a lot of farms bankrupt and empty. She would find these old barns, and we would crawl in, sleep in snow stacks, and the outhouses were still there from the old days. So we had a house. If you could find a Montgomery Ward's catalog, you were into toilet paper. And so my mother at night would sneak on her hands and knees and go through some surviving farms. And she would hide fruits and vegetables underneath her coat and then bring them back for us to eat at night. We would sleep in this coat wrapped up with her. I did have a brother born. He was born just before my father takes off for the train rides. There's an interesting crack. We're going to do a little bit of how. So you got to remember, once the panic sets in with the banks closed, and there's this time when people have to get into how are we going to survive with this. People started growing fruits and vegetables on their front yards and exchanged cooperative. I'll give you 2 chickens, and then the guy at the chiropractic might say, if you give me a chicken, I'll adjust your neck. And so things were all cooperative, all shared. But there's we got to slide in a little dark side here that I have to improvise because my memory can't connect with me ever having a sister. This is the best I figured it out. So some of your surviving schools, like Mills College, they were creating selling babies. They had to survive, so they figured out if they could buy from the mother a child for $25, they could go about selling that child for triple that.
Oh, wow.
So I'm guessing my mother, when my father gets the word of a job, say like Santa, a little farther away, she gets pregnant. She goes down and sells this child to Mills College for $25, so we could eat while he's gone. But I don't think, timing-wise, if you say, well, how could you time this in any kind of crystalline reality? It would be that, because the only thing I know is that I don't think he ever knew he had a daughter. If he did, this might be why they split up when they find out. He's so upset. In the meantime, you remember my mother's going down to these old barns. And so she picks out a couple who are living there, but she loves movies. She makes the mistake of going downtown Hayward to, where the sort of middle-class people are surviving fairly well. They got clothes and food and schools, and then they can afford to put money in the offering plate when the church paddle comes. But some of the more snooty, what you call Lady Bountifuls or whatever they are, couldn't have a poor woman with kids with no shoes and dirty and come into the movie house. By this time, they call a sheriff. He picks us up, puts us in a holding tank, and they arrest her as being an unfit mother. Now, you got to get a piece of history. There's no welfare. There's no backup programs for mothers with separate children. But if you're going to survive, if you look at the how-to part, mothers knew damn well you had to stay out of these rich areas. See? They knew that you could not go anywhere near police. So you had to pick some way of hiding. So by that time, we're hiding out pretty good until she makes the mistake of going to the movie. They contact Earl Hammond. He has to apply for legal custody of the children. They put her in jail for being an unfit mother. And so the best I know is siblings. Let's get a little piece. You're going to have to be patient. Now let's guess that Berdina was married before.
Mm-hmm.
Let's guess that I had some half-brothers.
Yeah.
So I only meet one of them when I'm way down. This is way down the line. There's a half-brother walk in and say, I'm your half-brother. And my mother, okay. So when did we find out about each other? So let's try to piece some pieces together. There's another interesting turn here with Berdina. This is my mother.
Mm-hmm.
You have to remember that she sells a daughter. There's another guy called Don Hammond.